In this tutorial, we're looking at 2023 paper 2 question 4, and it's all about coordinate geometry of the circle. In the first part of this question, we're given the equation of a circle in the form x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. You should recognize that formula from your maths tables. Essentially, when you have the equation of a circle in this form, you change the sign here and you change the sign here, and that gives you the center of your circle. So if I change this sign, the x value of my center is h, and the y value of my center is minus 3. And whatever's on the right hand side represents r squared, so if you get the square root of the right hand side, that's the radius. So this is all you had to write down for part A. In part B of this question, we're told that the perpendicular distance from the line x minus 4y plus 7 equals 0 to the center of the circle is 5 units. We worked out the center of the circle in part A, it's h minus 3. In other words, they've told me the perpendicular distance from a point to a line. We dedicated an entire tutorial to this, and when we studied the line, and again when we studied the circle. So we just have to go to this formula. This formula gives me the perpendicular distance from a point to a line. And in this case, when I sub into it, I know that that distance is 5. So in this case, we need to sub in for A, B, C, x1 and y1. Remember that the A, B and C come from the line. The coefficient of x is your a, in this case it's 1. The coefficient of y is your b, in this case minus 4. And the constant at the end is your c, in this case 7. Then the point we're dealing with is h minus 3. So all we have to do is use these numbers, sub them in here, and we'll work out two different values for h. So I've subbed in all of my variables here into the formula. And when you simplify the top, 1 by h is just h. Minus 4 by minus 3 is 12, plus 7 is 19, and the bottom of the fraction becomes the square root of 17. What I did on the last line then was I multiplied both sides by root 17 to get rid of the fraction. Now our issue is the modulus signs. And the question, bear in mind here that the question said to leave your answer in surd form. So the surd is not a problem. So it's not advisable here to square both sides. If we square both sides, we're going to have it's going to be really, really tricky to work it out. It's much easier here. We're just going to put plus or minus in front of the right hand side, and we'll be finished this question in 2 lines. So to finish this one off, to get rid of your modulus signs, you can just put plus or minus in front of the 5 root 17. And if you do that, then I just split it in 2. In one scenario, it's plus 5 root 17, and you subtract 19 from both sides, and there's one answer. In the other scenario, it's minus 5 root 17. Again, you subtract 19 from both sides, and there's your second answer. And that's all you have to do for part B here. In the final part of this question, we're given a circle. We're told 3 points on the circle are A1, A3, and A minus 5. We're told that the radius of the circle is the square root of 20, and we're asked to come up with the equation of the circle. This question is similar to all of the questions we did in the last tutorial on the circle. So if you got stuck on this one, it's worth going back over that last tutorial on the circle because it's very, very similar to this. The way we have to start this one off is we go to our maths tables and we start off by stating that every single circle can be written in the form x squared plus y squared plus 2gx plus 2fy plus c equals 0. And we're going to treat this question as a simultaneous equation where we have to try and figure out what is g, what is f, and what is c. If we've an abundance of information here, we've 3 points and we have the radius. So we just need to work out how can we turn each of those pieces of information into an equation in g, f, and c. Well, the easy answer to that question is we're just going to sub in the points. I know the point 8,1 is on this circle, so I can just sub it in. Instead of an x, I can sub in an 8. Instead of a y, I can sub in a 1. So let's start there. So I've gone ahead and I've subbed in my other points. If you sub in x equals a and y equals 3, you end up with a squared plus 9 plus 2ag plus 6f plus c. If you sub in the other point a minus 5, you get a squared plus 25 plus 2ag minus 10f plus c equals 0. Now this might seem like a nightmare because we're after introducing an a squared term and a 2ag term. But this is actually good news for us. What you should recognize is that both of the equations we're after coming up with have an a squared and a 2ag. So a handy way to deal with this now, since this equation is equal to 0 and this equation is equal to 0, they're equal to each other, we're just going to let these two equations equal to each other and see what happens. So I'll take the first equation that I have on the top there. I have a squared plus 9 plus 2ag plus 6f plus c. And I'm just going to let that equal to the other equation. The other equation I have on the bottom is a squared plus 25 plus 2ag minus 10f plus c. So I let them equal to each other, and now notice that the a squareds cancel and that the 2ag's cancel. And now I'm happy out with that. Now I only have f's and c's left. And we're looking to do a simultaneous equation with g, f and c in it, so this is good news. Now all I have to do is move everything to one side. So maybe what we might do is move everything to the left-hand side. On the left-hand side for the numbers, I'm going to have 9 minus 25, which is minus 16. For the f's, I'm going to have 6f plus 10f, which is 16f. And for the c's, I'm going to have plus c minus c, which cancels out. So I'm just left with minus 16 plus 16f equals 0. So this is even better news. The g's and the c's have cancelled, so I can actually work out a value for f. If I just add 16 to both sides, I get 16f equals 16, so f must be equal to 1. So rather than actually having to do a simultaneous equation in 3 variables, we're only going to have to do it in 2 variables now, because we know a value for f. Now if you look at the question, we still don't have enough pieces of this puzzle. The first equation we came up with had g, f and c in it. This equation now only has an f in it. So I could sub in f into the previous one, but it would still be impossible to solve because I don't know, I need to find a value for g and a value for c. But now we need to think about the other piece of information is that we know the radius of this circle. So the information we have so far, we know f equals 1, and we know that this equation is valid as well with a g, f and c in it. Obviously at this point I can sub in f equals 1, but let's just hold off on that for a moment. The next thing you have to recognize is that we know the radius is equal to the square root of 20. Now if you go to page 19 in your maths tables, beside the formula we took at the very start for x squared plus y squared plus 2gx plus 2fy plus c equals 0, beside that it tells me that the radius of a circle is the square root of g squared plus f squared minus c. And I know that the radius of this circle is the square root of 20. So that there, right there, that's an equation with g, f and c in it. So that's the missing piece to the puzzle that students might have struggled with. This now we have enough information written on the board that we can work out what is g, what is f and what is c. Let's just simplify this one first. There's square roots on both sides, so obviously I'd square both sides to make it simpler. I could say that 20 equals g squared plus f squared minus c. And let's go back to what we worked out a moment ago. I know that f equals 1, so let's sub that in. I could say that 20 equals g squared plus 1, and obviously 1 squared is just 1. Now, like it makes sense now to bring my 1 across. If I subtract 1 from both sides, I get 19 equals g squared minus c. The next step now is I now need to start looking at the very first equation we came up with. Instead of an f, I can sub in a 1. And now, instead of a c, I'm going to be able to sub something in here. What we want to do here is isolate our c. It's not a good idea to isolate your g. If we try and get g on its own here, we're going to end up with a square root. So it's going to be way, way easier to finish this question if we try to get c on its own. So I'm going to bring c to the left and the 19 to the right. I can say that c equals g squared minus 19. And I want you to realize why that now is going to make our life a lot easier. What we're now going to do is we're going to rewrite the very first equation we came up with. The very first equation we came up with had a 16g. It had 2f, which since I know f is 1, I can say this is just 2 times 1, so that's actually a 2. And it also had a plus c, but I know based on what I'm after doing here that instead of a c, I can sub in g squared minus 19. So instead of 16g plus 2f plus c, I have 16g plus 2 plus g squared minus 19. And that is equal to minus 65. And now I have one equation and one unknown. There's a g squared, a g and a number. So obviously this is just going to turn into a simple quadratic equation which we can solve. Okay, so at this point we have a g squared, a g and a number, so we just have a quadratic. All I've done is moved everything to the left hand side and you end up with g squared plus 16g plus 48 equals 0. If you factorize this, you get g plus 12 times g plus 4. And if you then solve it, you get g minus 12 and g equals minus 12 and g equals minus 4. Once you have a value for g, you can work out corresponding values for c. As we worked out in the previous slide, c is equal to g squared minus 19. So if you sub in g equals minus 12, your corresponding c value is 125. And if you work out that g equals minus 4, your corresponding c value is equal to minus 3. Okay, so now we have two possible answers. We have maybe f is 1, g is minus 12, and c is 125, or f is 1, g is minus 4, and c is minus 3. The question was to get the equation of the circle, so you have to go back to your log tables, and we have possible values for g, f, and c, so you sub them into this equation. If you sub in the first set of values, you get x squared plus y squared minus 24x plus 2y plus 125 equals 0. If you sub in the second set of values, you get x squared plus y squared minus 8x plus 2y minus 3 equals 0. But now you should recognize that the question says to find the equation of the circle, not find the equations of the circles. So it's not looking for multiple answers. Only one of these answers is actually valid. And we have to try and figure out which one doesn't make sense. And to do that, we should try to find the center of each of these circles. By looking at the diagram in the question, we could guess whereabouts the center of the circle is. So hopefully if we work out the center of each of these circles, one of them just isn't going to make sense. So imagine if I gave you the equation of this circle and I asked you to find the center. What you would do is you'd recognize that the coefficient of x is 2g. So minus 24 is 2g, and the x coordinate of the center is minus g. So you're going to take the coefficient of x and you're going to divide it by minus 2. The x value, the x coordinate for the center of this circle is a 12. You're then going to take the coefficient of y, you're going to divide it by minus 2. Plus 2 divided by minus 2 gives me minus 1. So the center of this circle is 12 minus 1. And that doesn't make sense. If you look at the diagram, the coordinate we know for certain is the point 8, 1. If the x value is 8 units over from the y-axis, there's no way the center is to the right of the point 8, 1. We can tell for sure that the center of this circle has to be to the left of the point 8, 1. The x value has to be less than 8. It can't be bigger than 8. So this set of answers doesn't make sense. So we can cross that one out. It's not valid. If you look at this one, it makes more sense. If you take the coefficient of x, which is minus 8, if you divide that by minus 2, you get plus 4. The coefficient of y is 2. If you divide that by minus 2, you get minus 1. And looking at your diagram, a center with coordinates 4 minus 1 seems to make a little bit more sense. So your final answer is this one here. X squared plus y squared minus 8x plus 2y minus 3 equals 0.